I've made some serious mistakes as a full-time content creator, and I'm feeling in a self-deprecating mood today, so I'm going to share them with you. Make sure you're taking notes because I do not want you to make the same mistakes that I did. By the way, this video is sponsored by Riverside, more on them later. Okay, so this is one of the biggest mistakes that I made in my career, hands down, and if I hadn't made this mistake, I would have been a lot further along. I have consistently been scared to try new things as a content creator throughout my journey. Let me give you some examples. It took me forever to start sharing short-form video content on Instagram. I was so late to the Reels party that all my fellow creators were blowing up on Instagram and I was just dragging my feet, not sharing the new content format because it felt too uncomfortable and too alien to me. That was also the case with TikTok. I mean, how many of you watching this can relate to this? I took far too long to join TikTok. And then when I did join TikTok, I wasn't consistent. In fact, at the time of filming this video, I'm currently experiencing a major flop era on TikTok, simply because I grew to 20,000 followers on TikTok about 2 to 3 years ago. And since then, I have not posted consistently at all, or at least until now. I'm very consistent on the platform now, but the algorithm is heavily punishing me for it because I took too long to start and I did not remain consistent. You might be wondering why I dragged my feet with going all in on TikTok or just short form content in general, especially because if you've watched my content before, you know that I know that it's a really powerful format of content. Like, you know that I know it's the right thing to do. However, in addition to knowing that these formats were really popular and could probably help me on my journey, I also knew that my focus was elsewhere at the time. It was in long form YouTube content, and that's very much what I focused on. Regardless of that though, me dragging my feet with short form content and new platforms like TikTok definitely meant that I wasn't able to grow my audience and help as many people as I possibly could have in the early days of my career, and also still now. Like, this mistake is still very much haunting me. Before we move on to the next point, let me explain a couple ways that this mistake might be manifesting for you and in your career without you even realizing. For example, is there currently a social media channel that you know you should probably be on and that you have the capacity to actually start sharing content on, but you're dragging your feet with it and telling you a bunch of stories as to why you should not be on that platform? I currently have that with LinkedIn, which is why I've started to share content on LinkedIn. I was dragging my feet with that platform for years. So answer that question honestly, because I'm willing to bet that a lot of you know that you should be putting some of your effort into a new social media platform or a new content format, and you're dragging your feet with it and making the same mistake that I did. I'm going to take this one step further and actually set you some homework. Fun. I want you to write down one thing that you know you should be doing, but that you've been putting off for the past weeks, months, years. Write it down, and then underneath that, write 3 things that you could do to help you take action on that thing that you're avoiding. Okay? Don't just write it down. Make sure you've made it very clear. 3 things that you could do which will help you start sharing that new content type or start that new platform. Write those 3 things down and challenge yourself to get those 3 things done within the next week. You're welcome. The next mistake that I made in the early days of my career as a creator is that I really didn't utilize the right tools. I also didn't explore any new tools. And again, this is a mistake that I sometimes see myself making right now as well. Your girl isn't perfect. I think that's probably the biggest lesson from this video. There are so many tools out there which can not only make content creation easier for you, but also help you create better quality content. And by you not trying out these new tools, all you're doing is sticking your head in the sand and actually missing out on the opportunity to speed up the content creation process and to improve the quality of your content. 2 things I think all of us would love to do, right? So as always, I want to give you some practical advice as to how to avoid making this mistake moving forward. And on this occasion, I want to focus on a tool that I really want you to try, which is called Riverside. Now, Riverside is an online studio designed for high quality video recording and editing. It's also powered by some incredible AI tools that I really wish I had access to in the early days of my career. Instead of me just listing what these tools are, I'm going to give you a demo of some of my favorite tools so you know exactly how you can improve your content creation process the second you stop watching this video. So we're inside my Riverside account right now, and we're in my demo studio, which I use specifically for you guys. And I want to start by showing you some tools which will allow you to improve the quality of your video with just a few clicks. So we're going to click on the AI producer button on the top right-hand corner. You can see at the top that there's a button which says remove pauses. Essentially, when you hit apply, Riverside will use AI to remove unnecessary pauses within your video. It even allows you to specify the length of the pauses that you want to remove, which basically allows you to have full control over the pacing of your videos. This is super important when it comes to retention, so ensuring that people stay on your video for as long as possible. If you have these consistent pauses which are inside the content that you're sharing, people can sometimes lose interest in your video and therefore click out of it, which will not help your standing with any social media algorithm. In addition to this, they have an option which says remove filler words. When you hit apply for that option, Riverside will use AI to remove any filler words that you are saying throughout your video. So if you are someone who is prone to saying, but, we all kind of do it. It's how we all speak. Riverside will actually be your best friend because it will allow you to remove those filler words with literally one click. Now, another feature that I've never spoken to you guys about before, but literally blew my mind, is the find fluff feature. So it literally finds the fluff in your content. So if I was sitting here filming and I went off on a bit of a tangent and it didn't make any sense and it wasn't very valuable to you guys, the audience, Riverside would find that section and suggest removing it. I mean, it's not highlighted there because I don't ever share fluff. No, I'm joking. Obviously, I fluff about all the time, just not necessarily in that clip that we're using. But if I did have a bunch of fluff, Riverside would find it and make it easy for me to remove it. Isn't that insane? The last tool that I want to show you today is the Magic Audio tool. All you have to do is hit apply and it will automatically improve the audio quality of your video footage. So if you're someone who's filming without a high quality mic and you're worried about the quality of the audio in your content, Riverside will make it easy for you to improve the quality of that audio with one click. So if you want to avoid making the same mistake that I made in the early days of my career by not utilizing some of these insane tools available to you, then you can head to the link in my bio to join Riverside. You can also get 15% off when you upgrade your plan when you use code Jade Beeson. Okay, this next mistake that I made, maybe this is controversial, I don't know. I don't think it is, but it was pretty significant. Several times over my career, I have reached out to, taken advice from, or worked with people who are not familiar with my industry. This is actually very common when you are becoming a content creator or when you're building a social media first business, because it's still a new industry to some extent. I mean, it's a lot less new now than it was like when I started 4 years ago, but it's still pretty new, which means it's not uncommon for you to end up working with freelancers, accountants, etc., who don't actually understand your business model, or for you to confide in friends and family who might run their own business and maybe it's a really traditional like bricks and mortar business, for you to ask them for advice and in return actually get some advice that's not relevant and not helpful to you at all, obviously no fault of their own, because they're not familiar with your business model, right? I wish from the beginning someone flagged this to me and made it clear how important it was to really confine in people who understood what I was doing. Let me give you an example. My old accountants, so very much not the accountants that I work with now. The accountants I work with now are incredible and they're very like creator first. But the old accountants that I worked with, I remember I once had a phone call with them and I explained like how my business worked. And I explained that I'd been paid like £1,000 for a sponsorship. And their response on the phone was, oh, that must be nice. And I was like, oh, I think my accountants hate me. It was like the weirdest energy. Like they did not understand what people were paying me for. They didn't understand why they were paying me so much. It was just an awkward experience from the very beginning. Like they were not helpful to me in any way, shape or form. So very quickly I left and it was a great decision. That's just one example of when you could be working with people who don't get you and actually how detrimental, my God, I can't say the word. Detrimental, and exactly how detrimental that can actually be to your business, right? So be careful with the people you're working with and be careful with the people you're asking for advice from. All right, the next mistake that I made is in the early days of my journey as a content creator, I went through this phase where I followed like everyone in my niche. This was especially when my niche was starting to really grow. So we're talking like maybe 2021, 2022 days where it was like absolutely skyrocketing. I would just follow everyone I found who was talking about social media, content creation, entrepreneurship and marketing. I would literally follow all of them. This was an error because it quickly led to me spiraling. Like I cannot explain the negative impact this had on my mindset and also on my business. The reason why is because it made my social media so loud and like noisy. That's the only way I can really explain it. It started to give me anxiety to go on my home feed because I felt like all I was doing was comparing where I was at in my journey to other people. I always say, don't compare your step 1 to someone else's step 10. I say that because I've done that before and it does not help you in any way. It also made me hyper aware of what everyone else was doing, which made me feel like I constantly wasn't doing the right thing or made me feel like I wanted to try what they were doing. So for example, if someone had just started a Substack, I'd be like, oh, maybe I should start a Substack. If someone just launched a course, I'd be like, oh, maybe I should launch a course. It was giving me shiny object syndrome because I was seeing all these people have success with different things and thinking maybe I would have more success if I switched and done their thing. But the truth is the grass is always greener where you water it. So I'd have the most success with whichever one thing I was focusing on. That's what would create success, you know? In general, it just made me feel a bit rushed and kind of like I was always behind. So it wasn't helping me at all from a mindset perspective or from my actual business. So I had a huge clear out and I unfollowed a lot of people. And nowadays I only really follow people in my niche who I either have like an actual personal connection with, so like I've actually met them, or I just find them more inspiring than triggering, you know? I'm very selective in that way. And I want you to be too, because if I didn't wake up and realize what was making me feel so negative, then my business could have turned out very differently. Last but not least, a big mistake I made was not investing in my kit sooner. I want you to listen to this properly, and I really hope you don't do that thing where you just like see the title of the section, make a note, and then keep it moving, because this is a heavily nuanced conversation to have. I always say that you don't need fancy kit to get started, and I stand by that. I started my channel filming on my phone. I didn't even use the rear cameras. So like when I say rear cameras, I mean these cameras. When I first started filming, I used like the front camera on my phone, and this is not the camera you want to use. You want to use the rear cameras because these are higher quality. But I was such a novice that when I started, I would use the front camera, and I would also look at myself in the preview window, which is why for the first, I don't know, quite a few videos that I have on this channel, I'm not looking at the lens, which used to drive people mad, but whatever. So yeah, I started my channel with my phone. I also didn't have a mic until like a few months in. And then when I got a mic, it was this like 10-pound wired lapel mic from Amazon. Like I really didn't invest in my kit for a while. Now, that is not the mistake. I stand by that. That was the right thing to do. And I think use whatever you have to get started, because honestly, guys, I grew to tens of thousands of subscribers without any fancy kit. Like a ring light, my phone, not even the mic for the first like 10,000 subscribers. So I stand by that. However, the mistake that I made is that in between the first year of my channel and like the fourth year of my channel, I did not invest in my kit in the right way. So this is by the time that I was earning an income through my content and through my channel. So I was starting to reinvest some of that money into my kit. But what I was doing was I was buying the cheap stuff. So I was buying like kind of the knockoff items. Like I bought like a wireless mic from Amazon that like didn't have great reviews, but it cost 20 quid. So I just bought that one rather than investing in the DJI mics that I currently have that cost me like £200, right? Another great example is I bought the Sony ZV-1, which is a great vlogging camera, by the way, but it's not necessarily for like sit down talking head videos like this video and like most of the videos that I film. But I bought it because I didn't want to buy a fancy mirrorless camera like the one that I currently use. The camera that I'm currently using is the Sony Alpha 7, and it's paired with this monster of a lens. I actually have to double check what the lens is. So the lens is called the Sony FE, and it's a 16 to 35 millimeter, right? Those two things paired together cost me almost £3,000. £3,000. But the thing is, I think you can tell. I think the quality of this content tells you that it's worth £3,000. I also now use an Elgato mic. By the way, all of my kit is linked below. The Elgato mic that I use, I actually think this was gifted. I think this was actually part of a paid campaign. But the Elgato mic is worth like £100 or £200, and it's a great mic, right? The thing is that the camera setup that I currently use, I literally only purchased like 4 to 5 months ago, which means for a good 3.5 years of my journey, I was scrapping it using cameras that weren't made for my type of video. After I was using the Sony ZV-1, I then started using my Osmo, which is this beautiful gadget. Love this thing. One of my favorite purchases ever. I use it for vlogging all the time. Is it made for sit down talking head videos? No, no, it's not. I was dragging my feet and avoiding investing in the proper kit that, to be honest, I could afford to invest in by that point. What should have happened is that the second I got to the point where I can comfortably invest £3,000 in my camera and lens, I should have invested in those two things at that point. And I didn't. It took me multiple years before I eventually pulled the plug and bought the fancy camera. And that's a mistake. I should have invested in that sooner. So that's why this is such a nuanced conversation. You can start with whatever you've got, and that is good enough. But when you earn enough money to invest in the proper kit, you should go ahead and invest in the proper kit. So those are some of the mistakes that I made in my journey, but I've made some other major mistakes which require like mini story times. You know what? Can you comment the word story time below so I can get a good sense of how many of you would actually want a video where I talk about things like nightmare brand campaigns? Don't forget that you can sign up to Riverside using the link below, and you can get 15% off when you upgrade your plan using code JadeBeeson. If you feel like hanging around, I recommend watching this video. It's all about the top lessons that I learned from some of the biggest creators in the world. Thank you so much for watching. As always, I cannot wait to see you in my next video.